The countdown to the showdown at the nation's highest court. Final preparations for the most crucial moment yet in the battle for the White House.
Their voice is final. They have the power to decide this.
I think that regardless of who wins, that our democracy is strong enough and our country will move forward.
Israel prepares for new elections forced by Prime Minister Barak's resignation. And urban meets rural in Texas at a church on a mission to help kids in need.
We just jumps in, gang tackling, try to remedy the problem.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News, reported by John Seigenthaler.
Good evening, everyone. 33 days after the election, the nation's highest court is facing a momentous decision which could determine the next president. Tomorrow, lawyers for Al Gore and George W. Bush head into the U.S. Supreme Court in Washington to argue the case. The Bush team is asking the justices to reverse Florida's Supreme Court decision, which ordered a recount of thousands of disputed ballots. The Gore team claims voters have a right to have those ballots counted. So in Florida, the counting remains on hold while the country waits for a decision. We begin our coverage with NBC's Kelly O'Donnell in Tallahassee. Good evening, Kelly.
John, tonight the Democratic National Committee is flying in voters from South Florida and urging others to make the drive to Tallahassee, a show of support for the hand counts to begin again on the eve of arguments before the U.S. Supreme Court.
Candles in place of counting.
Count every vote.
Tonight, Democrats from around Florida use the public library, the scene of the halted hand count, as a backdrop for protest.
The count must go on.
Democrats here to urge Florida's Republican-dominated legislature not to intervene when lawmakers hold a special session tomorrow to consider naming a Bush slate of electoral college voters, since he was certified the winner here in Florida. Republican lawmakers say if the U.S. Supreme Court does not resolve the election, they will act.
We must proceed and we must be ready, and that's exactly what we need to do.
Earlier today, a special delivery to the U.S. Supreme Court. Under uniformed guard, 18 boxes of evidence and exhibits from the election contest trial flown in from Florida. Everything but the ballots.
There have been no orders from any court requiring that the ballots be transferred from here to any other place.
Those 9,000 disputed Miami-Dade undervotes, abruptly packed and sealed Saturday when the hand count was called off, remain in Tallahassee.
Morning.
No comment today from Vice President Gore attending church, while his top lawyer suggested the Tuesday deadline for Florida's selection of electors could slide.
To some extent, both sides have already said this is going to go beyond December 12th. In fact, the Florida legislature is talking about possibly taking some action on December 13th or December 14th. So I think the December 12th deadline is important, but it's not nearly as critical as the December 18th deadline.
December 18th is when the Electoral College actually meets. Today in Austin, George W. Bush stepped outside briefly to greet a crowd gathered at the governor's mansion, while his advisor, former Secretary of State James Baker, was holding firm on both dates.
You can't extend that deadline. It's in the Constitution, or at least it's in federal law.
Making that point in another way, today Bush running mate Dick Cheney visited their transition office just outside Washington. Another subtle but public way to indicate their view. The end is near.
The Vice President's lawyer, David Boies, acknowledged today the urgency, saying if the U.S. Supreme Court does not lift its stay, allowing the vote counting to continue, in his words, it's the end of the road. John?
NBC's Kelly O'Donnell, thanks. Now to Washington and NBC's chief law correspondent, Dan Abrams, on the steps of the U.S. Supreme Court. Dan, what do we expect to hear from the Bush team tomorrow?
Well, the Bush team has argued that the Florida Supreme Court opinion was out of line. They refer to it as a crazy quilt ruling. They say there were no uniform standards, that rules were changed. The effect, quote, it has created a regime virtually guaranteed to incite controversy, suspicion, and lack of confidence. Now, as expected, they also said that there were violations of the U.S. Constitution and a federal statute, but now they say there's another problem. They say this opinion was built on a nullified case, that Florida ruling the U.S. Supreme Court vacated earlier this week. They say without that, none of these recounts could have or would have happened. John?
And Dan, this could be an uphill battle for the Gore team, right?
No question. The court has already implied that there's an inclination towards ruling for Bush. They're in essence saying there was nothing wrong here with the Florida Supreme Court's ruling, that there's no federal issue here, no rules were changed. And they say, quote, the court engaged in a routine exercise of statutory interpretation that construed the Florida election code. Now, as for the lack of standards, those dimpled, hanging chads, they say that's really the norm in most states in the nation, and it's not unique to Florida. John?
NBC's Dan Abrams in Washington. Dan, thank you. Now a brief program note. NBC News coverage of tomorrow's historic event begins at 11 a.m. Eastern Time when the Supreme Court session is set to start. The justices will release an audio tape of the proceedings shortly after the 90-minute hearing ends, and we will bring you that to the moment it becomes available. To Capitol Hill now, where it is feared that feuds stemming from this battle for the White House will continue long after Inauguration Day. Here's NBC's Joe Johns.
The supercharged atmosphere the next president will have to live with is a hot topic on Capitol Hill these days.
The only way that either man can establish legitimacy is to reach out and try to reach the kind of consensus that is so critical among parties and among all people.
It's important for us in the Congress who are not happy with the final outcome to cooperate in trying to be civil with those who did win.
But how to do that, especially with narrow majorities in the incoming 107th Congress, particularly in the Senate, where there will be a 50-50 split if Gore loses and Joe Lieberman returns to Capitol Hill. Democrats want a power-sharing arrangement, co-equal status. Republicans offer concessions, but
you can't have co-everything because basically you could checkmate each other at every turn.
Republicans say they would still control the agenda, however, because Vice President Dick Cheney would cast the tie-breaking votes if Bush wins the White House.
The vote would be 51-50. There would be a Republican majority.
Republicans stand to gain an extra seat if Gore wins. No worries about a 50-50 split. Still, with both parties sending their rank and file, even their staffs, to wage the PR war in battlefield Florida, the tension and partisan anger has been raised to new heights, some say even worse than during the impeachment of President Clinton. The Republicans and Democrats have different approaches to top agenda items, including tax cuts, Social Security reform, and both sides say they want cooperation, not gridlock.
I think the people want us to work together very badly.
Legislatively, both sides in Congress appear poised to wage new battles on the same old terms. One significant difference, more Democrats in both houses, as they wait to find out who will be sitting in the White House. Joe Johns, NBC News, the Capitol.
When NBC Nightly News continues in a moment, the political maneuvering in Israel and the new push to increase the peace in Northern Ireland. To Israel now, embroiled in its own political showdown tonight, one that could result in a face-off between bitter political rivals, the current prime minister and the man he defeated. Here's NBC's Dana Lewis.
Down but not out, Israel's Prime Minister Ehud Barak is fighting a high-stakes game to cling to power. Today, his Labor Party voted to support him as their candidate for prime minister in a snap election he called. I want to say to all of you, thank you, and together we will win, he told them. Hours earlier, Barak tendered his resignation to Israel's president, an election in 60 days. The question is why? Barak claims he wants a referendum on his peace initiatives in the face of 300 deaths in 10 weeks of fighting, escalating violence that today included gunfire in Hebron, and a bare-knuckled street brawl between a Jewish settler and a Palestinian. Sunday, more funerals. For a 19-year-old Israeli ambushed on a bus by a Palestinian gunman, and for a 23-year-old Palestinian shot by Israeli soldiers. Today, former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced he will challenge Barak, claiming the early election is designed to block him from running. Opinion polls suggest he would win easily. He appealed to Parliament to dissolve the government and change the election rules.
I think they have no patience and no stomach for parliamentary tricks.
Israel's election laws exclude Netanyahu from running because he's not a member of Parliament. Now the candidates could be headed for the courts.
It's a big mess because, it's the first time these laws have been put into practice.
Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat says peace talks will stop until elections are over. No peace talks, more violence. Ehud Barak has risked his career on a political gamble. He says the peace process is at stake. Dana Lewis, NBC News, Tel Aviv.
To Northern Ireland struggling to preserve its own peace process. To help out, Bill Clinton leaves tomorrow for one last attempt as president. Here's NBC's John Palmer.
Flowers mark the spot where a Protestant cab driver was shot dead in Belfast last week, prompting the revenge killing of a Catholic workman, just days before President Clinton arrives in Northern Ireland on a peace mission. During Mr. Clinton's first visit to Ireland 5 years ago, he was greeted by some of the largest and most enthusiastic crowds of his presidency. On this, his third and final trip to Dublin and Belfast as president, aides say Mr. Clinton hopes to use his popularity as leverage to put Northern Ireland's drifting peace agreement back on course. After 30 years of strife between Protestants and Catholics that claimed 3,600 lives, President Clinton helped forge a power-sharing arrangement. The so-called Good Friday Agreement has been weakened by months of political wrangling and sporadic violence, but remains in effect.
Leaders of both communities are working together on basic issues that affect people's lives.
Nevertheless, there are big problems, especially the refusal of the IRA to decommission or surrender its weapons until Britain reduces its military forces in Northern Ireland.
The parties still reflect an underlying suspicion of one another. They've had great difficulty in the implementation of the agreement.
After his visits to Dublin and Belfast, Mr. Clinton plans a sentimental trip to England, a final meeting as president with British Prime Minister Tony Blair, and an audience with the Queen. John Palmer, NBC News at the White House.
Winter is still a week away, but the Northern Plains got a preview today of the frigid weather forecasters have been warning about. An Arctic cold front pushing south from Canada caused plunging temperatures from Montana to Wisconsin. This is Fargo, North Dakota, where last night's low temperature was 17 below zero. Tonight is expected to be even colder, and the weather system causing it all is moving east. When NBC Nightly News continues in a moment, a town which welcomes kids who feel unwanted. In focus this evening, a sanctuary in rural Texas where at-risk children from big city neighborhoods are getting a second chance. It's a town called Center. NBC's Jim Cummins has our report.
When I look back over my life, I see how far the Lord has brought me.
There is something special about this church in a place called Possum Trot, deep in the piney woods of East Texas.
If you know that God is all right, let me hear you sing.
The Bennett Chapel Missionary Baptist Church is full of children every Sunday. Little kids from the mean streets of Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio, hundreds of miles away. 70 of them rescued by 42 families who have adopted them or provide foster care. All of these children, ages 3 to 12, have special needs. They had been abused almost every day of their lives until they came here, according to Pastor W.C. Martin.
These are kids who have been hurt by other adults, right?
Oh, yeah.
What are some of the problems that they've had?
Well, drugs, sexual abuse, physical abuse, abandoned, left alone, you name it, and they have had it.
Social workers here in East Texas have never seen anything like this because most prospective adoptive parents do not want troubled kids, older children, or a large number of siblings.
And state caseworker Judy Bowman says there is a huge need for foster and adoptive parents throughout Texas and the U.S.
To find a group of people in a small rural area like this where there are so many families who want to give themselves and to adopt these special needs children, this is truly a phenomenon.
Throw it to Terry.
A phenomenon that began with Pastor Martin and his wife Donna 3 years ago. They adopted 5-year-old Tyler and 8-year-old Mercedes, siblings.
What's different about the life you had before and the life you had now?
It's good now.
It's better now?
Yes, sir.
What part of it's better? What do you like better?
My family.
The Martins are also foster parents to Joshua and Terry, who's 11 years old.
How do you like it here, living with the Martins?
Great.
What do you like about it?
Got a better family.
In what ways?
They treat me great.
Has it been easy to raise these kids?
No, sir. No, sir. There are some times that we felt like giving up, to be honest with you. Yes.
How do you gain their confidence?
By letting them know that we're not going to give up on them.
Come on now.
The idea of adoption spread through this little church. Pastor Martin says many members of his congregation asked him about it, so he went to the state of Texas.
The state caseworker said, if y'all can find me 10 families to do this, we'll come and teach a class at y'all church. We found 23 families.
Almost all of them already had biological children of their own. Before long, couples like Glenn and Teresa Lathan became parents again. They adopted 5 sisters, ages 5 through 10, who were living apart.
When they called me one day and said, what about it's 5 girls and they're not together, we want to bring them together. And then just the thought of that, just bring them together, that they'll know each other as sisters. I said, well, I guess so.
What is it they fear most, that you're going to give up on them?
Yeah, well, get them to somebody else. Let them go to another adoption home or something like that.
But Pastor Martin says that won't happen here, because this church is one big family.
If one family hurting, we all hurt. If one family got a problem, we all got it. So what we do, we just jumps in, gang tackling, try to remedy the problem. And sometimes it crops back up, but we get back and then work over it again.
These are hardworking people who do not have a lot of material possessions, and they've had babies. But what they want to do now is reach out to children who have not had the same security and love that their own children and that they grew up with. And they want to reach out to these children and make a difference.
And Pastor Martin has only one expectation for these children, that he and the families in his congregation have rescued.
My dream and my hope for them is that they can grow up and recognize the love that was placed in their life, and that they will be willing to give it to somebody else.
Jim Cummins, NBC News, Center, Texas.
When we continue, more from Florida, the election problem the Supreme Court won't be addressing tomorrow. Finally tonight, with the outcome of Florida's election and the presidency itself on the Supreme Court's agenda tomorrow, the thoughts of some Floridians whose votes were not counted. Residents of Jacksonville and Duval County. Their story from NBC's Kerry Sanders.
At the Dayspring Baptist Church this morning, a lingering question. What happened to their votes?
We have fought too hard to get a right to vote. People have died trying to get people to vote. And then when it comes time for us to make a change, we don't count.
On Election Day in Florida, a near-record turnout. But when the ballots were tallied in Jacksonville's black precincts, a problem emerged. 27,000 ballots thrown out. In some black precincts, 1 in 3 ballots disqualified, compared to heavily white precincts where just 1 in 14 ballots was thrown out. Corinne Brown is the congresswoman in those Jacksonville neighborhoods where the votes did not count.
I don't know what caused it, but the end result is that throughout the state of Florida, thousands of African Americans have not been able to vote, or their vote have not been able to count.
Elections officials here admit the ballots themselves may have caused confusion. Instructions on the sample ballots mailed to every voter said, vote all pages. The sample showed all 10 candidates for president on one page. But the Election Day ballot was different. Page 1 had only 5 candidates for president. Page 2 had the other 5. Anyone who voted on all pages as instructed ended up voting twice in the presidential race. That's called an overvote.
We agree that it's very unfortunate that any vote not count due to an overvote. We do believe, however, that the injection of race as an explanation for this is unfair, and it's also not productive.
The Justice Department is looking into the vote irregularities in Florida.
We as a people are not set back by these things.
Pastor Moses Javis knows what it is to fight what the mainstream may dismiss as irrelevant. In the 1960s, he worked for a presidential commission integrating schools in Alabama.
I think the system has committed a crime.
But here in Duval County, promises from elections officials this will not happen again. And they say they will buy new voting equipment before the next presidential election. Kerry Sanders, NBC News, Jacksonville.
And this reminder, Tom Brokaw will be here tomorrow morning at 11 when the Supreme Court begins its hearing and for the release of the audio tape of the proceedings once it ends. Continuing coverage of the court and the battle for the White House may be found on our website at msnbc.com and on MSNBC on cable. And that is NBC Nightly News for this Sunday. Now here's Jane Pauley with a preview of tonight's edition of Dateline.
Thanks, John. Coming up tonight on Dateline, a young man is murdered, and police believe they know who did it. But the suspect never went to trial.
What's it like as a police officer to know that a guy you believe committed murder is walking out of the jail?
It's a smack in the face, but it drives my determination.
The suspect says police just failed to prove their case. But where is he now? And why have more people he knows turned up missing? That story tonight at 8, 7 Central on Dateline. John?
Thanks, Jane. I'm John Seigenthaler reporting tonight from New York. And for all of us here at NBC News, good night.